Hello, everybody, and welcome to our on-demand webinar. The title for this session is From Sign Up to Superfan, Mastering Identity Verification and Onboarding. The subtitle is Turning First-Time Users into Loyal Customers, and I think that's the main thrust of today's session. Just to give a bit of context of why we're here, I think what you can see on screen, this is an accompany piece, this webinar here for our Veriff onboarding toolkit. The QR code that is there on screen now will also be on slide for the very last slide of the session as well. So you'll be there. All you need to do is scan that, and that will take you through to the onboarding toolkit if you haven't got it already. This is a 45-minute masterclass that will help you digest what is included in that toolkit. The goal of this session really is to provide you with all of the relevant, actionable information you need to design and implement a truly successful and remarkably smooth onboarding process for your customers. We'll be paying particular attention to the nuances and the critical steps involved when your onboarding journey necessitates robust compliance measures and a seamless identity verification process as well. Now, there are obviously two people on screen here, and my name is Chris Hooper. I am head of brand here at Veriff. I'll be sharing some of the strategic insights on how an optimized onboarding flow directly impacts your customer acquisition and revenue growth. And then my colleague Maxime here is here as well. He is product lead here at Veriff. And we'll walk you through the practical product considerations, some best practices and innovation solutions that enable a frictionless and compliant IDV experience with your onboarding. So Maxime is the expert here. I think you'll be hearing a lot more from him today than you will be from me. Whenever we do these sessions, we always sort of ask ourselves why you are here, why the audience is here joining in. Now, we made some assumptions. I think we sort of assume that you're here because you understand, first of all, the immense value of transforming curious first-time users into engaged and loyal customers. We also assume that you understand that onboarding is often the first meaningful product interaction. And if you get it right, of course, then you build trust and momentum from minute one. And conversely, if you don't, then it goes in the other direction. We also, there's one third thing that we sort of assume about you as well, that you understand that a smooth customer flow can cut drop-offs, boost conversions, and set the stage for long-term usage of the product. So they're kind of our assumptions that we're starting with, and just sort of setting some context with really. But let's get started with just some sort of general context, I suppose. I think we've done a lot of research into customer onboarding. We've put a lot of data about this as well. And we know that, and hopefully you guys will know as well, that it's the first couple of seconds, up to maybe 90 seconds, up to 2 minutes, really, that makes or break a relationship with a customer here. I think what we're arguing is that acquiring and onboarding new customers goes beyond a simple registration form. It's one of the first kind of meaningful interactions that a customer has with your product, and will shape their expectations for the entire relationship of that, between you and them moving forward. A well-designed onboarding experience can dramatically increase user activation and retention, whereas the flip side of that, of course, is that a poor experience leads to drop-offs and lost business. In industries that require customer identity verification and know your customer sort of protocols, the onboarding process becomes even more crucial and complex to manage. You can see some points on the slide here, but I'll just kind of give a bit of an overview to those. When we're talking about kind of verification drop-offs, organizations that offer streamlined digital onboarding have seen customer acquisition rates increase by between 50 and 60%. Compared to the traditional kind of in-person, manual, paper-based processes. So that's pretty significant and particularly relevant for what we have these days, which is most businesses are digital. Most onboarding is remote these days. The converse to that is that over 60% of all users abandon during or immediately after ID checks. In tightly regulated industries like finance, for example, abandonment can spike as high as 68%, and that can translate to ultimately millions or billions of dollars even of lost revenue. So this is particularly important. I think that's the point to take from this slide in general, but there's a bit more detail to it as well. We talk about sort of trust signals also driving completion, which is another really important point to note. Clear progress indicators, things like in context, why you need this type things, tool tips, for example, and a branded UI can all raise completion rates by up to 3 times compared to empty flows. And of course, you need to make onboarding fast and easy. And in fact, data which is in our KYC guide says that average periodic reviews for low-risk customers can take up to 100 minutes to complete. And our research shows that customer drop-off when onboarding takes more than 19 minutes. So today's financial services must aim for excellent KYC quality within that precious time frame. I think it's speed is definitely of the essence here, and speed is a signal of trust, as it says on the slide there too. So there is also some business impact examples which I think are definitely worth calling out here. The impact of optimizing your onboarding and identity verification process is not just theoretical, it's tangible and immediate. It directly affects your bottom line. So let's have a little bit of an example here just to illustrate this. Imagine your business attracts 10,000 users, new signups every single month, and that each user generates an average revenue per user of $50 annually. Now consider the power of a user-friendly IDV experience where a mere sort of 10% uplift in your onboarding completion rates will mean an extra 1,000 users coming through successfully every month. And that directly translates to additional $25,000 in annual recurring revenue for your business. So this is not just really a nice to have. I think that's what we're saying here. This is a must have if you want your business to grow and become more successful. And investing in an efficient and user-friendly identity verification process isn't merely about meeting compliance obligations either, or reducing operational costs, although it's often looked at that way. What we're saying is actually it's a really powerful driver of revenue growth, transforming potential drop-offs into valuable long-term customers. So that's kind of the context. Let's move through to what so Maxim's part really, I suppose, which is the what this looks like and how businesses can sort of build this piece. So Maxim, welcome first of all. Thanks for taking the time to talk to the folks here. First question for you then. When we talk about building sort of great onboarding flows, especially with identity checks involved, things can get pretty complex. Can you just walk us through some of the principles that you follow to really drive conversions?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, thanks, Chris, for a great introduction. And I'm happy to dive into details of what you called out. So I would call out the 3 pillars, like the main that we'll look at is, first one is clarity, right? So we need to keep it simple for users, right? So every additional form, every additional step, and even any field is a potential drop-off. And even I would go as far as to say it's not a potential, it is a drop-off. So statistically, every field you ask from a user, somebody will be dropping at this field, right? So keep it simple, keep it to the minimum, ask only what you need at this moment, and also explain why. The users respond really, really well to explanations why this is needed. Because if we ask something that is not clear, why they need this, then the user are actually more likely to drop off at this field or step. So this is first, keeping really clear the steps. Second one, I would call out keeping user in control of the flow, or making it seem as if they have the control of the sign-up flow. So how to do this? First, step number 1 is break it into bite-sized steps, actually. So steps give customer control as they move through the steps, that they can move back and forward. Also, show the progress to customers. There is nothing more satisfying than doing something and discovering that we have done 20% of the job, right? So this taps into customer or like human psychology or satisfaction, to incentivizing users to move forward in the flow, and also give them assurance that they're doing the right thing, so they are on the right path, actually. So yeah, it does help increase the completion rate and the conversion eventually. And the third one is the confidence. So again, this is similar to what I have said before, breaking this into smaller pieces, showing the progress, incentivizing users to move forward and encouraging them, and sort of patting them on the shoulder and saying, okay, look, you are on the right path, or you have completed already 20%. So this gives users confidence that they are actually on the right path to completion, actually. How to do this? Multiple things. So obviously use very consistent user experience design, icons, progress bars, branding. Everything should seem very, very smooth to users as they ending up in the sign-up flow or onboarding flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of consistency piece is so important. I think what's interesting about those principles, actually, and I think as you were saying it there, it just sort of occurred to us that it's, that these don't require a big shift, right? I mean, these are things that are probably quite easy to adjust to and to sort of get the make that change. It's not necessarily a massive redesign that's required of your entire product flows or anything like that. It's more of a mindset shift and kind of putting yourself into the shoes of a potential customer and thinking, how do we make it easier for them? What is it? Removing those points of friction along the way. If every step has a clear purpose, it just kind of gives users that sense of control, doesn't it? And builds that trust from the first click, which I think is, that's the first step. And I think if you're already doing that, then that's you're already miles ahead, really. So that's great. So let's move on to the next slide, which I think is kind of taking this to the next point, really, which is how to do that point that we just addressed there. So, one of the things that we often see is companies applying a kind of a one-size-fits-all to their flow, right? So every user they treat kind of as the same, regardless of risk level, of use case, geography, or whatever it may be. So Max, let's just explore that a little bit. How should teams actually think about tailoring onboarding for different segments or audiences?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the risk-based segmentation. So obviously, not all users you onboard carry the same risk profile. So how we like to do this? So we would identify the higher risk cohort, and we will design a more comprehensive flow for them. So we call them high risk cohort. And that usually will not be big. So it can be between 5-10%, depends on your business. But then the rest of the users can be put into fast track sort of thing. So you ask less confirmation. You don't need to keep them waiting for any confirmations, actually. And that allows you overall to balance conversion with compliance. And you really put only those users through the paces who are actually like higher risk of sorts. Second pillar would be like the profile. Always know your audience, right? So you need to know what devices are being used by your users, and obviously a great, well-designed onboarding flow wouldn't work, for example, if a user uses some kind of device that is not supported by this flow, right? So that's a bummer of sorts. So of course, always make sure that the whole flow works on the devices that your users are using. And it can be sometimes a little bit trickier and maybe less obvious than you would think otherwise. So for example, if your flow requires document upload, make sure it works on all the mobile devices and all the popular browsers, right? And or for example, the selfie capture thing. Enabling camera on mobile devices can be tricky depending on the browser. So you need really to test this and make sure that it all really works smoothly for your specific audience. And the third one is geographic reach. So once you have customers coming from different regions, speaking different language, reading different alphabets, so you need to make sure, of course, that it's all supported really well in the onboarding flow. So for example, your customers might be using identity documents that are maybe less popular, right? So you need to make sure that your onboarding flow actually works with them really well, and you speak the language of your customer, obviously.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to it's very logical thinking in a way, isn't it? And being as inclusive as possible to make sure that so that you don't kind of to alienate or sort of block anybody from that process. I think that's ultimately what this all boils down to. But I think there is a sense there that you could sort of overcomplicate things, I suppose. But that's not necessarily what we're saying. We're talking about being intentional with it all, and really understanding that every step has a purpose. And making that purpose clear to the user as well, I suppose. For example, I think if you are in a business that has that doesn't have compliance requirements, then most of your users can go for a very fast journey. They can just speed through, and it's one of those things that only the higher risk cases, I suppose, will get the extra checks that they need. So it's about designing flexibility into this process and not friction. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about next, because this next slide looks at that very issue of sort of complexity versus simplicity. Now, as we all know that we've talked about this on a number of different occasions on different webinars and podcasts in our content as well, that friction is kind of the silent killer in onboarding. I think we've sort of phrased it that way, which sounds very dramatic, but I think it's very true actually. And even tiny delays or confusing steps can cause huge drop-offs. So that simplicity is very, very important. From your experience, Maxim, what are some of the sort of the high impact ways to reduce that friction across the journey, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to dive into some of the tips that are listed here on the page. So multi-page, multi-steps, I already mentioned, really one of the most effective ways to make your customer journey, to grow the conversion, actually. Progress bar indicator, again, this taps into psychology of giving satisfaction back to users, essentially, as they move forward in the onboarding process. Transition speed. So this is how fast or how responsive your sign-up flow actually is. So maybe you have seen some of the sign-ups where you click and you need to wait a half a second. But there are also sign-ups where you click and it immediately changes, right? So half a second is really small thing, but once that accumulates after the user sees or say 3 screens, they need to wait before the next screen loads, that increases the drop-off. So there is also something satisfying again about the screen actually changing immediately. It's very difficult to scientifically justify, but it really actually works. So make sure that the sign up is super smooth and the pages actually switch really fast, immediately, preload if needed. Contextual tooltips. So this taps into why. So customers, users are actually very much more willing to answer some of the questions if they know why they're being asked them. So giving opportunity for customers to understand why you're asking this through the, for example, contextual tooltips that actually don't necessarily complicate the flow, right? So this is optional, right? So there is like a question mark, for example, in the sign-up flow. It doesn't make the sign-up more complex, but it helps those customers who are inquiring, like, why are they asking this? And that actually helps to keep those specific users in the flow. Just-in-time check. So we tend to ask only the things that we need and only at the right time. So we don't ask we try not to ask many things in advance. And also it's great to tie those with some of the actions. So if the customer has completed some action, we may ask a little bit more complicated question that we need. It's related to investment. So once the user has invested into your product, they're again more likely to answer the question rather than the drop off during the sign up. We don't ask a lot of questions at the same time. So we rather like to spread them across our sign-up flow and actually later kind of the customer journey for some of more complicated questions. And error forgiveness. So not always the things go as we intend, right? Again, no matter how we try, there might be a user, for example, with a different device, with a different browser that just came out and for example, there is some issue in the flow. So they need to know how to get out of this. So we need to design also for error forgiveness. So there should be either, for example, fallback or a way to reach a support or some other way to what to do next. So think of a user who shouldn't be stuck in your flow if things go not as planned, actually. So I think that summarizes the top 3 tips, I would say, about making your onboarding flow better.
Love it. I love it. And what I like about, all of those actually, I mean, the just-in-time check particularly sort of jumps out for the reason of you can kind of tailor this to what your business is like as well, right? There's an element of you understand your levels of risk, you understand what you're prepared to do. And I think, I've seen it with a number of customers of ours that will bring in the trickier questions, if you like, later in the flow. They just want to get the person into the business. Maybe it's their first transaction or a transaction over a certain size, possibly something like that, which requires, okay, we need to have a slightly more in-depth look at this person and take them there. But if they don't, hit those triggers, then they're perfectly fine to continue on the platform and so on. So there really is an adaptability about this. But I think what we've talked about here is almost the theoretical stuff. But I think what I'd like to talk about next is the technological side of it, if you like. What are some of the tools that are available to people to help them tick off these things that we've talked about here today? So we all know that when building a product, especially sort of in regulated industries, there's a tension between compliance, fraud prevention, and user experience, and different businesses will be at different levels, and there's each one is unique in finding its sort of balance point there, I think. A lot of teams struggle to find that right balance. I think that's the first point of making. So how can technology help with that, Maxim?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a lot of tools actually on our hands. So it's just about knowing which tool to be used at the right time. So and the balance that we're aiming for is between the fraud, compliance, and user experience or conversion. So these are actually like the three levers that we are looking at. And what we want actually is to obviously reduce the friction while still staying compliant and keeping fraud in checks. The security checks shouldn't be seen really like as an annoyance, right? So depending on the design of the onboarding flow, they can seem to be like natural part of the onboarding and actually increase the trust, as we have already mentioned, rather than like annoyance or something that kind of blocks us from moving forward. For example, we have seen quite a few customers who were telling us, okay, guys, you do identity verification during the onboarding, and that actually makes me feel confident that you are a trustable company, so you know who your customers are. So depending on how you put this, how you present this, it can actually be increasing conversion rather than decreasing it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think as a business, there's a number of questions that you have to ask. Every time you have an interaction with a new customer, and the first one, of course, is is this customer genuine? Do they exist? Are they a real person? And the second question, I think, is that person of potential value to your business or potential harm? And I think that's where you can sort of look at whether they have a track record of fraudulent interactions, for example, and things like that, to sort of look at those things. And then the third question maybe is, can you continue to do that on an ongoing basis and every time they log into your platform? I think obviously the focus here is onboarding, but there is a piece as well where you have to look at that sort of re-authentication, I suppose. But I think the point is that when you're asking those three questions, the tools that we've mentioned here and that you've just described and mentioned on screen here, they can answer those questions very, very quickly. That's the point of it. They can get to the sort of figuring out that a customer is genuine, figuring out that they are of value to your business in a matter of seconds. And so I think that is the main thing here. That it's when the tech is working at its best, it just kind of fades into the background. You don't even realize it's there, and it doesn't have any. You are to the absolute highest levels of KYC, of compliance, the highest levels of fraud prevention. But very minimal impact to the customer journey there, and I think that's so it benefits you. It also benefits the customer, and will get them into getting the platform and doing the services that they want to do. So that's a really interesting shift that I think that this technology has enabled. Let's dive into identity verification specifically. What's the real kind of business impact of switching to automated identity verification, and why kind of is? And I guess the flip side to that question is why is performing manual identity verification just kind of not acceptable these days? Would you say?
Yep, absolutely. So many companies actually do the IDV manual, right? And this is where the cost actually start creeping very, very fast. So over 50% of the total costs come actually from humans trying to get those, for example, images from the customers, from users, and trying to then verify. And again, there are lots of issues that are rising with that. It's slow, right? So it takes around 100 minutes on average. It may actually take days, depending on which document. It's inconsistent, so depending on which document the users have sent, it may be a low quality copy. It may be a document you have never seen before. So it's really, really inconsistent. And kind of one of the worst things is also you can't tell users when to expect an answer, because it really depends on the, for example, on the document, on some other details, which information they provide you. While the users are very, very fast to drop, right? So we all know. So for example, here we have a number on the slide. So it's about 19 minutes when customers start to drop off during onboarding. And I would say 19 minutes is pretty generous. I have personally seen customers expecting verification within 1 minute, and if not, then that's gone. So this is where actually AI-driven verification comes into place. It's really fast, it's consistent, and it's quite accurate. So it does lower the operational costs heavily. So while still keeping the companies actually compliant in many industries. It also reduces this reliance on the humans, on human verification, less errors, much less delays, and normally it works within the seconds, actually. So it's really fast, it's consistent, and it's cheap. especially in comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points in that, isn't there? I think the speed thing from a customer sort of user experience is absolutely critical, right? I think we've done some customer case studies recently, and I highly recommend anyone watching this to check out our case study section, because this is kind of these points here have been illustrated by sort of real life examples of customers doing this stuff. One I spoke to recently was in the gambling industry. Their previous manual process was taking up to 48 hours for them to complete, and the nature and the reality of the gambling industry is that people quite often sign up to an account because there's a sporting event that they're interested in right now that they want to bet on or have some interest in. So they managed to reduce that 48 hours down to less than 1 minute, which I think is a really, I mean, it's an incredible turnaround, really, isn't it? But then there is an operational piece to this too, as you said. I mean, having your own manual fraud teams doing this, and it takes time, as we've just mentioned, but there's also the cost that comes with that too. And the fact that the world of identity is changing rapidly, and it's almost impossible to expect in-house teams to stay up to date with the most recent issues of driving licenses, for example. Do they know how the world of fraud and what's happening, what fraudsters are up to, in the same way that a dedicated team of experts like ours would do? So I think that's there's a couple of points there that I think are really kind of critical for businesses when they're looking at this piece. Now let's just talk a little bit around the sort of the biometrics piece, because this is something that identity verification is one thing. That's something that Veriff has done since inception. Biometrics is slightly more recent for us. I mean, we've been doing it a long time still, and I think that it's has kind of transformed, especially the speed angle, which seems to be the one that we keep sort of coming back to today. So let's talk about that. For this, I mean, users can sometimes feel that this is there is some mystery to it. It's a bit of a black box, or something that there's some sort of trepidation about and they're a bit scared of. So how do we make the biometrics piece feel like a valuable element of the product rather than something which is potentially off-putting to customers or a hurdle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some cases the biometrics actually seems like magic. I will be honest. Yes. So it's super fast, and it's very accurate. So it's very simple. So first of all, let's start with the kind of reducing the complexity part. So this is where like the magic part comes in. So to verify yourself, you just take a selfie, sometimes a video, and that's really it, right? And taking selfie takes under a second, and the verification is also instant. Here under faster verification, it says quickly, but quickly means literally like a couple of seconds. So there is a lot of work that is going on underneath. So it verifies this facial matching against the other data points in the database, but it's super fast. And of course, because the human is not involved, there are lots of advantages to this. Again, as Chris, as you mentioned, it's the cost, speed, accuracy, and consistency, actually. So in some cases, when the biometrics is used, for example, to augment the password entries, then it provides enhanced security, again, without adding too much friction. So taking selfie is something that has become very common these days. So it does increase the security by quite a bit without adding almost anything to friction, I would say.
Yeah, and I think the biometrics piece is interesting, and facial biometrics is what Veriff uses. Obviously, that's something we've discussed before. But it's not only that the speed element to it, but it's also that there is an enhanced level of fraud protection here, because this is very hard to fake. And I think when we're, especially a lot of businesses in financial services, well, across all industries actually, are sort of terrified of the deep fake threat, and that sort of from Gen AI. And I think this kind of liveness detection, especially, but the biometrics, when combined with it, is a really powerful tool against that particular type of fraud, because it's it offers layers of protection which just can't be manipulated. So it's a very robust way of doing it, and it's also done very quickly, which is something that is we've come back to many times when we're talking about the onboarding piece. This sort of speed and that users just expect things to sort of work that much quicker. And I think what I particularly like is the way that this sort of security technology has evolved to become more intuitive and easier. You're not adding more steps in. In fact, you're taking some of them away, right? And you're making you're replacing that sort of more cumbersome process with one that's quicker and faster, and it gets sort of even it sort of adds in value, I think, even more and gets smarter with the behavioral signals in the background and so on there as well. So let's just talk about that kind of adaptive piece, because I think that's really, really sort of interesting. I think we mentioned sort of earlier on that sort of not every user should experience the same journey. I think there's certain triggers that can be in place and so on, and that could be the comfort level of the business when it comes to risk and so on. Let's talk about that adaptive risk and sort of behavioral analytics, because I think that is a really interesting sort of thread that runs through all of this. How does it work in practice, Maxim? I think that's probably the main question that needs to be tackled here.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, actually. So when we mention multiple cohorts, then the question is, so what do we do differently for those? So this is a great example of this. So behavioral analytics. The great thing about this, or I would say the greatest thing, it runs in the background. It doesn't require a user to do anything specific, actually. So for example, it can monitor typing speed, like mouse movements, a lot of device fingerprinting, a lot of device data, without, again, user doing any actions. And for example, again, the geolocation real time. So it actually runs really, really in the background. And that gives us quite a few advantages that we can leverage. So it's without the noise, right? So the user might actually might be doing something else. So for example, we ask them to submit pictures, while at the same time, we already running quite a bit of checks in the background without user needing to do anything. And sometimes this is all you need. So sometimes you run the behavioral analytics and you don't need to ask user to do anything else. So this comes into this low risk cohort, for example. So again, it seems like magic. So you have actually done your compliance part and maybe anti-fraud part as well without user doing any kind of actions, and might even noticing without noticing it, right? So they go through the sign-up flow without any additional actions that need to be taken related to IDV, actually. Yeah. And we can also adapt this, right? So for example, we see behavioral analytics all coming clean, right? So it seems to be a very legitimate device, very legitimate users, all fine. We don't do any additional checks. Sometimes, if there are some flags, then we can turn into our second branch of the flow where we would ask for additional information. Again, for 90% of the users, that wouldn't happen. So they wouldn't even almost know that it actually happens in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was the stats I've seen is it's roughly 95% of genuine users kind of experience none of this. It's just they're through and it's all fine and working nicely, with that sort of only 5% undergoing additional checks. And of course, that means 95% have a really smooth flow with no interactions, whatever. That 5%, even if they are, so there is some question mark there. I think even they sort of experience a smooth experience, but there are the additional checks there. And what I really like about this too is that you can fit it into sort of your other risk mechanisms that you have, you're operating as a business. I think we mentioned earlier on another case study that I worked on recently was with a marketplace in the US that sold very high value solar equipment, so solar panels and things like that, so thousands of dollars for each time. Their triggers were kind of manual on their side, that they would say, well, if somebody's ordering multiple pieces to the same address, or they're ordering sort of very, very quickly in line with each other, then those are the people who are going to be checked. Everyone else, there's a less suspicious pattern there. And so you can kind of work it into your bigger risk signals that are out there as well, which I think is a really good, really interesting piece, not just on in onboarding, but as things move on from there. So we're sort of we're meeting most users get a seamless journey, but only stepping in if something feels off, and that feels like a win for both conversion and security, I suppose. There's also maybe sort of less stress for the customer support team too, because they are the folks who are quite often at the sharp end of all of this and having to deal with potential complaints from folks who can't get onboarded or having issues along the way. So let's talk about them next, because I think that great customer support is often seen as a reactive piece, a kind of a sticking plaster, if you like. But during the onboarding stage, it can also be seen as a growth lever if done properly, I would argue. So what does high impact support look like, especially in relation to this sort of verification journey that we've been talking about today, Maxim?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, sometimes support is seen as an afterthought, right? So, but it's not too much difficult to actually design it into an onboarding flow, and then it becomes not a cost, but actually kind of a winning formula that actually helps you to convert customers. So Obviously, the support has to be fast, clear. Today, with the kind of AI involvement, the support can actually be very fast and actually up to the point. So it does help. So what we have seen, the AI chat boxes actually they help customers a lot to solve, I would say, around 90% of the cases without falling back to humans, for example. But there is much more to them than just slapping this chat box onto the screen. So designed for tooltips, designed for FAQs, to address the concerns immediately. Something I mentioned, so for example, what we like to do is near each field, we have a hint that explains to the customer why we ask this and what is it exactly and how it will be used. So it solves like 90% of the questions before they actually need to turn to somebody else. So that also obviously reduces the load on the support team. And what we have also found out that sometimes users would actually just ask support, would turn to support just to find out what quality of support they will get, right? So, and this is where the fast and up to the point response actually turn them into your customers rather than dropping off. So design with the support being a part of your sign-up flow rather than just the band-aid that tries to help customers after they have churned actually. And again, being proactive with hints, FAQs I already mentioned, and of course the best user experience design also tries to prevent many of the issues without even asking customers to read anything. So everything feels natural and intuitive.
Yeah, I don't think that's a lot of it. It is about reassurance, isn't it? I guess, and that kind of confidence building component. And again, I keep sort of referencing customer conversations I've had recently, but this issue has come up quite a lot, and I think it's another one to throw in. We were working with a crypto organization recently, and they sort of pointed out that there is a lot of suspicion around the crypto industry. There's a lot of bad scams and things like that happen it's just by nature of the industry, I suppose. So that's something they're constantly combating against. So when a customer signs up with them, a brand new prospect turns into a customer, they have to make sure that they are really on point when it comes to all of this stuff, because they have to reassure that customer that their money's going to be safe, that they're going to be able to withdraw it when they need to, and have access to it and things like that. So, this stuff is really, really important to get right, and especially in certain industries when there is that sort of confidence that needs to be built up. I think that's an identity verification plays a big part in that, or can do. And I think it's amazing how often the right proactive actions and the sort of the "we're here to help" message turns a drop off into a completed verification as well. So there's that kind of you're saving the day, as it were, when it comes to the potential fall-offs. And then eventually that person can become a loyal customer as well. But of course, I guess the flip side to this is that all of this needs to be done within the sort of without sacrificing the compliance element too. And I think one of the common misconceptions that I've certainly experienced when having those customer conversations, I think one of the early worries that they had before taking on, starting to use identity verification was that are we going to have to give up? Is us having this level of compliance going to be a real sort of a downer when it comes to our conversion points? Because that's the worry. But I think actually that seems to be a myth. I think at least the customers I've spoken to have said that was our worry coming in. It quickly became apparent that that's not the case. But let's talk about that next, because I think that is something that is probably on a lot of people's minds, is that we want to have this level of compliance in. We have to, because we're in a regulated industry. We don't want it to cost us when it comes to the sort of the UX and the conversion piece. So let's talk about that. What are some of the principles that teams building onboarding flows? What are they that are both sort of legally sound, compliance sound, and user friendly? Just talk us through some of the steps there, Maxim.
Yeah, absolutely. That famous trade-off, right? User experience versus compliance. Well, it doesn't need to be a trade-off, as you just mentioned, but it needs a conscious design, basically. It needs a conscious planning. So when designing our onboarding flow, we first actually talk to our legal team. So, for example, I, as a product manager, also would have extensive consultations with our legal counsel to understand their point of view, and we'll then find the compromise. So we'll find those sweet spots where we actually are compliant, but we also don't overload our users during the onboarding. So it requires like a bit of planning, or like sort of project management and conversations and then you will get a great experience, rather than trying to design onboarding flow and then slap onto this compliance part later. Then usually it turns out to be not great. So privacy by design. So during the planning, so when planning the user experience, also plan the compliance. That's what we do actually. So clear communication can't be stressed too much. So we have already mentioned. So explaining why we are asking for some data, how it will be used, how it will be stored, how it will be transmitted, and obviously not using any kind of jargon words. So be as clear. It may sound maybe less fancy or maybe less appealing to your content team, but the main thing here is the users should understand kind of what you are saying, rather than just be needing to Google some of the terms, obviously. Secure data handling goes without saying. Do the encryption in transit and storage, but also communicate with. So encourage the customer by pointing this out, that the data is securely transmitted and stored actually. And the tiered approach, we have already mentioned this a few times. So we ask for the data only when it's needed, and also preferably after the customer has invested into your product. Works miracles. So the more customers invested in the product, the more the less likely they are actually to churn at one more question that is asked.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's we've done some research that kind of backs that up as well. Actually, our Veriff fraud index is a survey of end users, and one of the questions we asked was, would you be prepared to go through sort of slightly more complex verification process and things like that if it meant that your data was safe and you were going to be secure? And the answer was overwhelming yes. I think 70%, high 70s, something like that. Actually went up into the 80s when it was particularly designed towards financial services. That question. So that I think there is a sort of an acceptance that end users will have to go through that. I mean, they know the state of the internet. They know that lots of things there's a lot of untrustworthy bad actors out there. So they know that when they are signing up, it gives them a bit of reassurance that their data is safe and so on. So we've talked a lot about what sort of what good looks like, I suppose. But let's talk a little bit around kind of how we can build that process, because I think that's something that is a sort of a key takeaway, I suppose, for folks here. In that, what is it that they need to be doing, I suppose, when it comes to sort of designing their own flows and that kind of stuff. Let's take everything that we've discussed today and imagine sort of our own sign-up flow from the ground up. Can you walk us through just sort of the key design choices that we've made and what kind of impact they've had along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So progressive disclosure, only ask the things that we absolutely need and only when we need them. It can also be rephrased by saying postpone everything that can be postponed when it comes to asking customers for the information. So that's like how I like to put this. So for each of the field, I have a question. Is it absolutely needed? What happens if we don't ask this information? If we need this, do we need to ask it right now, or we can ask it later? So quite a few questions need to be asked to build a great user experience. Clear step, and we have already mentioned quite a few great user experience enhancements like tooltips, multi-steps, allow users to go back and forth if your system allows this. Again, gives a customer confidence that they are actually in control. Have the progress bars that, again, give the satisfaction of customer moving forward. And also, less clutter, the better. So only show what's needed at this right moment on this particular step. We try to not overwhelm, for example, with some supporting materials. The supporting materials should be, for example, as the hints, which don't take like a lot of real screen state, actually. And identity verification. So whenever we need to do the full identity verification, meaning asking for example, for documents from users, then we do it only after certain steps, only when we know that this is our customer, they signed up, they already invested in the product, and maybe they have done some actions. So for example, right now, when the customer starts a trial with us, they have submitted the billing information. This is a great moment to ask for IDV, because submitting billing information is already an investment made in the product. So that's a great time to ask for additional or maybe sensitive information from a customer. Also, other channels are being used, so not only just on the screen, but also we do a lot of emailing, guiding users through the flow if whenever they drop off or whenever they need help. For example, at IDV step, there are still users hesitant to submit, for example, document pictures, and then through the email sequences, we try to clarify what is it that we're doing, why it's needed, right? And maybe also pointing out the alternatives, how they can move in the flow without submitting, for example, this particular document, if for some reason they don't want to do this. Yeah, and contextual proactive guidance. We do a lot of microcopy tooltips, as I mentioned. We also do a lot of kind of right just-in-time hints when they're needed. So customer does the action and something pops up and clarifies what's actually happening just right at the moment. So otherwise it's not on the screen. So being interactive requires quite a lot of investment from design team, from a product engineering team, but that's how the great user experience is actually built.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that stuff, a lot of what you mentioned there actually is not massive redesign time, right? I think it might be that it's just a handful of kind of thoughtful adjustments that can make the whole sort of process feel smoother and more respectful of the user. And I should just say actually that we do have a video of the sign up process that you can watch, just as a kind of an example, I suppose. And that is available on the landing page, but also via the emails that will follow up to this session as well. So you'll be able to watch that. We also have, we're talking on the subject of sort of content we've mentioned the Veriff onboarding toolkit a number of different times today. This is the companion piece to what we have here. Within that, it's basically essentially sort of a practical, easy to implement resource sort of designed to help you build better identity verification flows and do it faster as well, I should point out. And that's whether you're kind of building your first onboarding journey or refining an existing one. The toolkit will equip you with everything you need to drive sort of high completion rates, reduce friction, stay fully compliant, and do all of the things that we've discussed today. Within it, you'll find kind of three components, I suppose, that you can see on the slide here. The first is the onboarding strategy guide, which is a comprehensive step-by-step playbook for building high converting, low friction onboarding experiences. You can learn how to align your team around sort of the key onboarding goals, balance UX and compliance, and design verification flows that convert more users while keeping fraud out. It also includes case studies, some of which I've referenced today, actually, and some data-backed insights from successful onboarding implementations as well. Then there are some pre-written email templates. These are really useful, actually. I think many drop-offs going to happen simply because users aren't guided properly, as we mentioned today and Maxim said on a number of occasions. That's why this toolkit includes these kind of ready-to-use emails for every key moment in the onboarding journey. And they go from kind of the first touch messages to reminders for the sort of incomplete verifications to follow-ups after failed attempts and so on. All you need to do is sort of just plug in your own brand and send. They're fully customizable when you can sort of based on proven best practice and what's worked with for us as well, actually. So they've been sort of road tested, if you like. And then the final element is the couple of checklists that we've got in there, both sort of internal and external checklists. The internal checklist is to audit and improve your onboarding flow from the inside, so you can reduce UX friction, spot compliance gaps, identify activation blockers, and so on. And then you can put the external sort of customer-facing checklist to work by helping your users sort of understand what actions they need to take to successfully complete verification. This kind of dual-layered approach we found really useful, actually, and it sort of ensures your team stays aligned and your users stay on track. And we sort of, we believe that great onboarding is more than just conversions, right? It's about creating fast, secure, and trustworthy user experiences, which then translate into sort of long-lasting and loyal relationships with customers. So the toolkit was kind of built with that mission in mind, so you can move fast without cutting corners. I think it's a really useful resource, and I think there's a lot more sort of detail in there than we've covered today as well, because there's obviously it's a content type that allows it to do that. Okay, I think we've just we're almost at the end, actually. I think we've got just this sort of last slide here, Maxim, is just how Veriff can sort of help with onboarding, I suppose. We've talked strategy, we've talked the toolkit. Now let's sort of connect it, I guess, to the product. How can Veriff help startups and small teams to implement a better onboarding flow without having to build everything from scratch? Is there the information on the slide here, or is there more that you'd like to go into?
No, I think that conveys the story really, really well. So I'm really happy to dive into this because some of those tools are really kind of no code, like really, it's a toggle essentially in the station interface. You toggle is and you get your powerful tool that already works for you. So hosted verification page, basically, as I mentioned, just one toggle, you enable this, and then once you send your users to this page, they will start the identity verification for you. So it's fast, it's simple, it's a great start within the minutes for you with Veriff actually. Zapier, sort of similar, right? Maybe requires maybe it's not 1 minute, maybe it's 10 minutes, but with Zapier it can start really, really fast. So for example, you can ask Zapier to generate verification sessions for you. You can ask Zapier to actually store the outcomes of sessions for you, for example, in Google Sheet. You can also connect it to your favorite CRM, like HubSpot, for example. So you can really do a lot of automation with Veriff and Zapier connector. That is kind of out of the box. It doesn't require for you to mingle with low-level code by any means. But once you want to go a little bit deeper, so SDKs and API integration is at your service, and that obviously requires a little bit more investment, but also allows you to build even more flexible onboarding flow that corresponds exactly to your needs. I'll mention end user flow customization. So we mentioned branding, right, and consistent kind of design, and this is where the end user flow customization comes in. So you upload your logo, you define, you say what your company color is, and then the end user flow suddenly seems like to be actually part of your sign-up flow, right? So it is very consistent and very smooth, actually. Now, again, it's a few clicks by a mouse, actually. A convenience tool, really, email reminders. So whenever you get a verification done by your customer, you can schedule a lot of verifications that will be sent right into your inbox. So you will know actually when whoever completed the verification or whenever the results has been done. Again, it's one click, no investment is needed, and suddenly you're verifying your users.
Yeah, it's a great. I just wanted to skip forward to the next slide, really, just so I've got that the QR code on there for folks. That's again a reminder where you can find the onboarding toolkit. But just to wrap up what Maxim was saying there, I think that all of those steps on that previous slide really just kind of show off the sort of the flexibility that's available to you. I think whether you're starting with hosted pages or jumping straight into the API integrations, you can choose the setup that fits you and your team and your level of coding ability and your timelines as well. And there's no real need, I think, it's probably fair to say, for long development cycles or heavy implementation. We find that most teams can go live in under 48 hours. Some significantly less than that, actually. Those that are more complex obviously require a bit more time and a bit more effort that goes in there. But I think that the 48 hours number is something that we're very proud of, and that's something that shows that it's very quick to do. So it's about meeting you guys where you are, really. You can start simple, test fast, and scale when you're ready to do so, which I think is it's a really powerful tool. And I think every day wasted. I think I'm going to reference a customer case study because I'm very involved in them. But there's a conversation I've had recently where that they needed a verification. Again, this is another marketplace with dealing with high value sales, needed to have a solution in place because if they waited one more day, that was a potentially another fraud could happen, another fraud attack could happen that next day, which would have put them out of business. So I think they'd had 5 days on the trot of fraudulent attacks. They needed something fast. This is what they've got. They haven't had a fraudulent attack since. So I think it kind of speaks for itself a little bit there, which I think is a good point. And I think just say you can find all of our case studies under the resources section of our website if you want to dig into those a little bit more too. But that's us. That's us done here. We've gone over time actually, but I think there was a lot to pack in there, so I'm not surprised that happened. Thank you everybody for joining and for listening in. I think hope you find this session useful. And Maxim, thanks to you as well. I think that was a lot of information there, and I think you covered it in a really interesting way. So thank you for taking your time as well.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining.
Thanks everybody, and we'll catch you next time.